I have three stories today, and the first one tells us exactly how much we mean to God. Sinners, bad people, it doesn't matter how bad we've been, what we've done in our lives. When we finally discover Jesus, there is great rejoicing. Just listen. One day, some Pharisees came to Jesus and they said, "Leave here quickly. Herod wants to kill you." They hoped Jesus would be frightened and run away. Then they'd be rid of him and they wouldn't have to worry what to do. Jesus was not afraid of Herod. He knew his greatest enemies were among the rulers of the Jews. They hated him because he reminded them of their sins and because he taught the poor people. To the Pharisees, Jesus said, "You go to Herod and tell him I am at work healing the sick today and tomorrow, and on the third day I shall be made perfect. I must go on my way today, tomorrow, and even the following day. It cannot be that a prophet should die outside of Jerusalem." Jesus remembered how the Jews had killed God's prophets in other older days. It was the Jewish leaders and not Herod who would condemn Jesus to death. Many tax collectors and sinners followed Jesus and listened to his words. And when it talks about sinners, that would be people like you and me, those of us who are constantly doing things that we know we shouldn't, and then afterwards we realize we've goofed up. Well, those were the people who followed Jesus. And that's why the Pharisees and scribes found fault with him, because he hung out with those people. They said, "This man receives sinners, and he even eats with them." Jesus knew what they were doing, so he told stories to the people, and he told them parables. And a parable is a story that has a heavenly meaning. He saw many women in the crowd, so he told stories that the women would understand as well. What a kind man he was. "What woman," he asked, "who has 10 pieces of silver and loses one, does not do everything she can to find it? She lights a candle and she looks for it. Then she sweeps the house and looks everywhere. When she finds it, she calls her neighbors and her friends. 'Rejoice with me, I have found the money I lost.'" In the same way, Jesus said, there is rejoicing in heaven for one lost sinner who comes to God. Our next story is about a Pharisee and a publican. And you remember the Pharisees, they knew the law really, really, really well. They thought they were perfect, and they didn't think anybody else was. And in the crowd one day, there were people who were very, very proud of their righteousness. They despised people that they figured were sinners. To teach them a lesson, Jesus told this story. 2 men went up to the temple to pray. One was a Pharisee, and the other was a tax collector. Now you'll remember, the tax collectors were called sinners because lots of times they were not honest people. Now the Pharisee stood, and he prayed loudly for everybody to hear, "God, I thank you that I'm not like other men, unrighteous, unjust, unfair in business dealings, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give 1/10 of all I own." But, continued Jesus, the tax collector stood by himself. He would not even lift his eyes toward heaven when he prayed. Bowing his head, he beat his breast and he said, "God, be merciful to me, a sinner." And Jesus said, "I tell you, this tax collector, and not the proud Pharisee, went home with God's blessing. For whoever lifts himself up in his own sight is not pleasing to God, but whoever humbles himself shall be lifted up." And then we read the story of a very short man with a very long idea, a very tall idea. In Jericho, the city, there lived a rich man whose name was Zacchaeus. He was the head tax collector, once again a sinner. When news came that Jesus was passing through Jericho on his way to Jerusalem, Zacchaeus wanted more than anything else to see this wonderful man he'd heard so much about. Zacchaeus stood with the crowd gathered beside the road, but he could see nothing. He was too short to see over the heads of the people. Down the road he ran, and he climbed into a sycamore tree. Now he could surely see Jesus. Soon travelers going to Jerusalem came along the road. The people of Jericho watched eagerly to catch a glimpse of Jesus. On the travelers walked until they came to the sycamore tree. Here, Jesus and his disciples stood still. Jesus looked up into the tree and he saw Zacchaeus. "Zacchaeus," called Jesus, "come down, for today I must stop at your house." How surprised Zacchaeus was. Now he could take Jesus home and talk with him. Joyfully, Zacchaeus led the way. As they went, others followed. Some found fault because Jesus was stopping in the home of a tax collector whom they called a sinful man. The Pharisees would not enter such a house. Oh, they hated sinners. They were much better than them. Zacchaeus' heart was changed by Jesus' kind words. He told Jesus, "Behold, Lord, I will give half of my goods to the poor. And if I have taken more from any man than I should, I will give back 4 times as much as I took." Jesus was glad to hear Zacchaeus say that. And he answered, "Today salvation has come to your house, for the Son of Man is come to seek and to save those who are lost." If Jesus was here today, he'd be looking for you and me, because we're pretty bad sinners, and he'd want to know that we wanted to come to heaven. He's not here today, not in body, but he is here in spirit. He's here when we hear Jesus' words on the radio or on television or on videos, when we go to church, when we sing, when we hear songs. Jesus is here, and all the words and the songs are calling to us. So listen and think and make a choice. Jesus wants you to come in heaven. That's my stories for today. We'll have some more tomorrow. We'll start with the Easter story. But until then, see ya.